Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Dr. Michael Oren joins us from Israel. Good morning, Dr. Oren. How are you?
I'm good, Hugh. Good to be with you, as always.
Well, I got to tell you the background to this. Last night I did debate coverage, so I got back home about midnight, and I turned on Daniel Gordis's new audio book, Impossible Takes Longer. And Chapter 2, unfortunately, recounts the history of the Kishinev pogrom in 1903, when I think, I want to get my numbers right, about 120 Jews were murdered in the streets of Kishinev. Then the Odessa pogrom killed 400 in 1905. The Hebron pogrom in 1929 killed 67. And I realize he wrote that book in April, but the pogrom of 2 months ago dwarfs all of this. And it's sort of, he didn't know this was going to happen, but, you know, these are pretty awful events. Does Israel, has it fully internalized how bad it was on 10/7 yet?
No, not only have we not internalized it, in certain ways we've never moved beyond October 7th. The country is still, bogged down emotionally in October 7th, and I think it's going to take a very long time. Even the notion that we lost hundreds of soldiers on that day, that is very difficult to internalize, and we haven't, we haven't confronted who these soldiers were, their faces. Whenever a soldier is killed in Gaza every day, there's a portrait of that soldier in the news, and you read about that soldier, but we're talking about hundreds of soldiers who are lost, and we don't know them. So it's all going to be part of the healing process that's going to come at the end of this war. It's going to begin at the end of this war. It's a healing process that's going to be on many levels. It's going to be emotional. It's going to be political. It's going to be strategic. But it's an essential process.
Now, you have just come back from the States raising money for United Hatzalah, and I hope you were successful. 87 soldiers have been killed already of the IDF in the Gaza operation. I do not expect this to waver in any way or to end short of complete and utter destruction of Hamas. Do you?
It has no choice. It has to be. In other words, we cannot restore internal security. People forget. They always talk about the homeless Palestinians. We have 250,000 Israelis who have been living, in hotels and in guests in people's houses now for 2 months. Their lives completely upended. They can't return to their homes. The southern part of the country would be rendered, in effect, uninhabitable if Hamas can reorganize, rearm, and stage its next attack. And Hamas leaders say openly, we're going to do this a second time, a third time, the fourth time. It's not going to happen. So we have to continue this. It's interesting, there's a lot of criticism of previous Israeli governments, and I served in several of them, that didn't mount this type of offensive every time Hamas fired, 800 to 1,000 rockets at it. We didn't do it. And I think one of the key reasons was not only that the people thought that Hamas could be bought off, but also that Israeli society was unwilling to pay the price here. And the price was estimated. The price tag was at the lives of 500 soldiers. October 7th ended that debate. And 95% of Israelis have internalized that we have to pay this price, and there's no way around it. Every soldier's death is the end of a universe for a family. We understand that. But we have no choice.
Right
and
now,
we're just going to have to keep on the war.
Dr. Oren, you are a Princeton man. I am a Harvard guy. And I am deeply embarrassed by President Gay of Harvard, who should have resigned yesterday. The University of Pennsylvania president should have quit. Ditto MIT. Did you have a chance to watch the embarrassment of elite American education 2 days ago?
I watched it several times. It wasn't just that their answers, this notion that somehow threats of genocide have to be contextualized by people actually committing genocide. The thorough insanity of that response. It was also the manner of their response, that they had a smirk on their faces. And it, to me, it bespoke a moral and intellectual corruption of these institutions. And I think it goes hand in hand with financial corruptions, because we're finding more and more about, Qatari donations to these universities, especially Yale, which apparently hid its donations from Qatar and under all sorts of different schemes. I think that yesterday was a metaphor for what happened in higher education in many cases in the United States generally.
Now, how would you fix that? My personal view is that the Harvard Corporation, the board overseers need to jointly dismiss President Gay and buy out everybody. They've got a $50 billion endowment. They can give everyone a golden parachute and push them off the campus and take the keys to their office. And it's not going to recover until they do. And then you expel every student involved in anything that menaces another student. It's not hard, Dr. Oren. Do you think it's hard?
Yeah, but no, I don't think it's hard. I think that the process, what's occurred on American campuses is the end process that took 60 years. It began in the 1960s with the Youth Rebellion. Youth Rebellion tried to export its ideas beyond the university gates. It didn't succeed, so they went behind the gates, closed the gates behind them, okay, and created their Marxian dystopia within these universities. And reversing that process is going to take many years, many years. I taught at Harvard back in 2006, and I was president at Harvard Yard when Larry Summers resigned. And you remember why he resigned?
Remarks about women in sciences.
Yeah, it was also about anti-Semitism. He said that many of the people on campus were anti-Semitic in effect, if not in intent, right? And so this is not new. This goes back 15 years, right? More than 15.
Stand by for a second, Dr. Oren. I want to continue to talk to you for 5 minutes off air, and then we'll put it in the podcast and use it tomorrow. Don't go anywhere, America. Dr. Oren will be right back with me from Israel after these messages. I am back now with Dr. Michael Oren. Dr. Oren, I want to ask you about the mechanics of flooding the tunnels, because it's gotten some coverage by the Wall Street Journal, a glancing reference in the Times of Israel. The Israeli chief of staff said, oh, that's a good idea, but I don't want to talk about specifics. What do you think about that? Because it seems to me that if you have an ant farm and you fill it with water, it starts at the bottom and the ants run to the top. What do you think? I'm just a lawyer. I'm not a physicist.
So here it is. I think I've mentioned it on this program before. I've written about it. It was also in an interview I had with the Wall Street Journal about 2 weeks ago. I mentioned the possibility of flooding the tunnels. And because this is what the Egyptians did. With seawater, the sea is right there. You can just put a couple of pumps there. Our problem is the hostages. So if we don't know where the hostages are, then you can't flood the tunnels entirely. If we have a better sense of where the hostages are, we can begin to eliminate the tunnels one after another. And that's militarily, Israel has been doing this. IDF has claimed to have already destroyed 500 tunnels. Now, that I don't know, in terms of how many thousands of tunnels the Hamas has. They have over 300 miles of tunnels that go down about 200 feet, quite deep. But the obvious answer would be to use seawater. You can use a flammable substance. There's many ways you can clear out a tunnel. What you don't want to do is send soldiers down there, because tunnels are the great equalizers, Hugh. You can have the most powerful army in the world, but when you go into a tunnel, American service people knew this from Vietnam. They knew it to a certain degree in the battles of Mosul as well, where there were tunnels against ISIS. In that tunnel, it's you and your pistol against the terrorist with his AK-47. That's not a very good balance. Matter of fact, one of the most dangerous units to be in the Israeli army is a commando unit that its expertise is clearing out tunnels. Very high casualty rate. So the best way to do it is not send anybody down there, but to simply, flood or ignite.
Well, explain to me. My assumption is either Hamas is going to ransom the terrorists for their lives, the hostages for their lives, or they're not. If they are, if you slowly fill up the tunnels with seawater, they'll move the hostages up a level. And if they're going to use the hostages, they'll surrender and use the hostages as bargaining chips. But I don't see any other way of getting them out. And I know that Netanyahu, the prime minister, met with the hostage families, and they're very upset. But is there any alternative to forcing the surrender of Hamas?
None. My working assumption is that as the noose tightens around Hamas, around their leadership, they will come back to the negotiating table. And they're going to try to play for time. Remember, keep in mind, Hamas's goal is a ceasefire. That's all they care about. It's the only way they're going to survive is the ceasefire. And they think that by playing the time, the Palestinian civilian casualties will mount up. Pressure will continue on the Biden administration and other foreign governments to impose a ceasefire. And that means Hamas wins. It gets away with mass murder. Israel loses. So they're going to try to play for time. Their big problem is going to be, and listen to this, Hugh, is that the hostages that remained are going to come out and tell the world what they went through. Everything, from physical torture to sexual abuse. And that will not redound, I do not believe, to Hamas's benefit in the long run.
Will there be trials of these terrorists under Eichmann rules, or has Israel permanently done away with the death penalty?
Well, Israel's right now is done the death penalty, but there's legislation afoot that has been tabled to renew death penalty for terrorists. But it's interesting you should mention the Eichmann trial. Yesterday, coming back to Israel, I had precisely that conversation. Are we going to have this type of trial? Because in America, you don't see the testimonies of the terrorists. American television will not broadcast anything that could be quote unquote coerced, even though these confessions are not coerced. But in Israel, we are seeing them. And they are terrifying. They are shocking. You're talking about multiple rapes, not just of women, but also of men and also of dead people, necrophilia. And they talk very openly about it, and how they were instructed to do this by their commanders, these terrorists. And I think, on one hand, and there was a difference of opinion around the table among several experts, it was very important that we actually show this and we have a trial, an Eichmann-like trial. Other people were were skeptical, feeling that the world won't cover it, and they'll say it's coerced, or American television won't broadcast it because the world has changed since 1960.
All right, my last question, Dr. Oren. The UN Secretary General is a moron, and he's also quite obviously anti-Israel. What do you think the United States ought to do with this building and the people in it?
That's not a fair question. I've been saying this for years. That piece of real estate along the eastern is a beautiful piece of real estate. It'd be a great park. I do not understand why the United States allows a patently anti-Semitic institution to remain on its territory. I say let them move to Tehran. Let them move to Damascus. Be my guest. Move to Moscow. I don't understand. I think it's incompatible, certainly with the United States. It's incompatible with New York City, which has the largest Jewish population of any city outside of the state of Israel. I don't get it. And I think make some very good housing and affordable housing along that river with a very good view.
Or you could put in a coalition of Western democracies that are actually dedicated to the spread of freedom and an incremental increase in liberty and literacy across the globe. Dr. Michael Oren, good to have you from Israel. I'm gonna try and figure out how to get over there in January and broadcast for a month. If that's the case, I hope you'll join me in doing that.
Be great.
Dr. Michael Oren on X at Dr. Michael Oren. Thank you, my friend. Good to see you again.